Well, he's a Republican who won big in a blue state. Now former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie is offering a roadmap to Republicans to win everything from state races to the White House.
It's all spelled out in his new book. It's called Republican Rescue, where the former ally of President Trump tries to distance himself and Republicans from his policies. Joining us right now, the former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie. Nice to have you on Good Day
Great to be back. Thank you.
So, you talk about Donald Trump. It's not like you totally divorce yourself from Donald Trump.
Not at all. No.
Right?
Listen, everybody who supported Donald Trump gets in line behind me. You'll remember February of 16 when I dropped out of the presidential race. I was the first elected official in America to endorse him. I chaired his transition. I played Hillary Clinton in debate prep. I played Joe Biden in debate prep. I chaired his opioid commission. There's lots that President Trump did that I support and still support. But if we want to win again, we can't be talking about 2020 anymore. We can't be moaning and whining about, oh, the election was stolen when we have no evidence that it was stolen. It's a losing proposition for us. So what I'm saying in the book is, we need to move forward, put together a group of policies that can contrast to what Joe Biden and the Democrats are trying to do and not talk about yesterday.
Okay, so, I mean, there's a lot of talk that you want to run for president of the United States, and I've heard from other people that Donald Trump still wants to throw his hat back in the race. What happens?
Well, what, if we both want to?
Yeah.
Then we'll run against each other. I mean, I'm not one of these people who would defer to anybody. Forget about Donald, anybody. If you decide you're good enough to be president, you want to be president, and you think you can win, then I think it's disqualifying if you say you'll wait for someone else to decide. Are you going to do that when you're president? Wait for someone else to decide? You got to be decisive, you got to be strong, and if I decide I want to do it, I will, no matter who runs. But I will say this, Rosanna, I'm not going to do it just for the experience. I've already had the experience. So if I do it, it's good because I think I can win.
Now, I know you said that Trump's 2020 election claims are false, but you've also said in an interview, I think it was recently with the Times Magazine, Maggie Haberman, that you would not rule out a potential Trump candidacy, supporting a potential Trump candidacy in 2020.
Yeah.
You said you can't have both, though.
No, sure you can, because, look, what he said about this stuff, I completely disagree with. I think he's wrong and demonstrably wrong, and I think I prove it in the book. But I don't know who else is going to run. And to me, politics is not a spectator sport. You can't say, oh, well, I don't like this, so I'm not going to participate. We all have to participate, and we have to choose. I told the British ambassador a number of years ago when he's asking to explain our system, I said to him, look, in America, you don't always get to vote for who you want to vote for. You get to vote for who's left. And so we'll see who's left in 2024, and then I'll decide. But 3 years from now, no reason to make that decision now.
Well, what about some of the elections that happened recently? Because I think it kind of surprised a lot of people. Have you seen a lot of Republican-won elections? What does that speak to a broader sense of what's happening in politics and what we can possibly look forward to?
Well, I think if you look at Virginia and New Jersey, we came very close to winning the governorship, but we also gained a bunch of seats in the legislature, which was great. And in Virginia, we won the governorship. And I think it's because we talked about things people care about. We weren't talking about grievances and vendettas. We were talking about cutting taxes. We were talking about making education where parents are involved in the day-to-day lives of their kids as students. Well, you know, we talked about preventing crime and making the streets safer. That's the prescription for winning. People don't want to hear about what happened yesterday. They want to hear about, if you win, what are you going to do tomorrow? And that's what the book is about. It's to say, here's the plan for what we should do. And by the way, in my opinion, Joe Biden and the Democrats are handing us an opportunity right now. Let's not hand it back. Let's grab it and take it.
Yeah, in the book you say it's a truism of politics that you can't beat something with nothing. That's true about candidates. It's true about the ideas that candidates discuss. Many of us, we look at what Joe Biden and the Democrats are trying to do in office and think purely on the merits that they should lose because their ideas are so awful. What's so awful about them?
Look, we're sitting right now with 6% inflation. My wife went to the supermarket the other day, and one of the things she bought was this big pack of toilet paper. It cost $29.
What?
$29.
Which one? Was it one of those like 6 equals 24 rolls?
And the really soft one?
It was big. I don't know.
I don't know this. I don't understand this math anymore. 6 rolls is not 6 rolls anymore.
It's
6
24.
rolls equals 24 rolls.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. That's why I don't buy it. And Mary Pat, I hope, understands it. But she came in and it was a big pack. She was carrying it on her shoulder. And she said, can you believe this cost $29? Wow. I mean, the policies of, and by the way, paying people to stay home. We had 4.4 million people quit their jobs in September. Why? Because the government's giving them money to do nothing.
Well, that should be over now, right? Or
We hope so.
Or do you think the child care credit could be adding to that?
The child care credit can be adding
But what
to that.
about, I mean, some of these families really need that to put food on the table.
Look, and for the families who truly need it, they should get it. But I talked to a guy just yesterday here on the street in New York who came up to me and said, he said, Governor, I've been getting deposits directly into my account from the government. I don't even know what it's for. I mean, there is so much money out there that Joe Biden is spending. 1.9 trillion in January. Now another 1.2 trillion this week. Now he wants to do another 1.75 trillion. I mean, these are numbers that we can't even comprehend. And what it's doing is it's putting too much money into the system, driving up prices in a huge way, and it's going to hurt all of us. And let's look at what he did in Afghanistan. I mean, awful thing to have people grabbing onto the bottoms of planes because they're so desperate to leave and falling off them as they take off, leaving Americans back there when he promised us that he wouldn't. It's making us look weak around the world. And the last thing is, you just walk around this city, and it's like a lot of other cities in this country. Crime is rampant, and police don't feel supported because you got folks like Joe Biden, Bill de Blasio here in New York, and others who don't support the police any longer. And it's affecting the quality of life everywhere. And what we see on the streets here in New York, in my home state, New Jersey, in Newark, and in other places, is unacceptable. Those are all things that are a product of Joe Biden saying defund the police and not supporting police every day. Those are things that people really care about. That's awful policies. But if we don't say what we'll do, people will say, who needs you?
Right.
So that's why the book is out, because I want to show people a way to go. Because I won twice in a blue state as a Republican. That's where we need to win if we're going to win national elections.
Yeah, speaking about your state, we had an awfully close election there with Jack Ciattarelli and Phil Murphy. Ciattarelli just conceding. What does that speak to the states, I mean, to the politics in your state as of right now?
Well, it shows that, once again, New Jersey is a pretty tax-sensitive state. Phil Murphy spent 4 years raising just about every tax except for the sales tax that he could. Property taxes went up, income taxes went up. And so people are tired of the government getting bigger and bigger. And
But he still won.
He did. And that's because there's 1.1 million more Democrats in New Jersey than Republicans. So you're running up a steep hill. Yeah. One of my friends said, you made it look easier than it is by winning twice. And it is hard to win as a Republican. But what I think is going to happen across the country is if Democrats are winning by that much in a state, by the way, that hasn't elected a Republican to the United States Senate in 50 years, if we're getting close in those states, imagine what we'll do in the swing states.
All right, coming up at 8:30, we're going to sit down a little bit more with Governor Christie because he's got this book, Republican Rescue, and we're going to talk about his life-threatening battle with COVID. It was a lot more serious than we thought. What President Trump had to say about that and the direction he thinks the country should go in getting people vaccinated.
Plus, his predictions for the New York Mets in his role advising owner Steve Cohen.
I forgot that he advises Steve Cohen.
Yeah, board of directors.
You remembered. His new book out, it's called Republican Rescue. Former Jersey Governor Chris Christie is quite candid in his book about his battle against COVID.
He writes about the fear of being intubated and not speaking to his children again, and then a priest praying over him. He tells us the brush with death happened because he was careless about COVID precautions while working with President Trump on debate preparations.
6 of the 7 of us in the room prepping him for the debates got COVID, including him.
And then you talk about a conversation that you had with the president. When you were sick, you actually checked yourself into the hospital. And the president called you and basically asked how you were feeling. And then he asked you, are you going to say you got it from me?
Yeah.
Do you think he was calling because he wanted to make sure that you weren't going to say that, or he was asking about your health?
I think both. You know, he started off by asking how I was feeling. And remember, he was in the hospital at the same time. He was calling me from Walter Reed. He wasn't feeling well. And so I think he genuinely was concerned about whether I was doing okay. But he was also really concerned about whether I was going to blame him for getting COVID. And I said to him, well, I don't know who gave it to me. I mean, the 6 of the 7 of us in the room got it. I don't know who patient 0 was, but whoever it was gave it to all the rest of us. And it was just a funny moment because it's so him. You know, in the beginning, he cared about how I was feeling, but really, he wanted to know, like, I'm not going to get blamed for this when I'm in the middle of an election, am I? As contrasted with his wife, Melania, called or texted me every morning that I was in the hospital, and she called Mary Pat every day. that I was in the
Wow.
hospital to make sure that I was getting everything I needed and to check on whether I was telling her the truth about how I was feeling.
And she had COVID too at the same
She
time.
did. I had COVID at the same time.
Now, are you a long hauler? How do you feel?
No, I actually feel really good, Roseanne. I'm
Okay.
very lucky.
Okay.
You know, I had a little bit of fatigue for a couple of months afterwards, but that cleared away. You know what else I was having? Crazy dreams.
Really?
Like in
Like what?
color.
I've heard what?
Here's the craziest one I
All
had.
right, let's hear about
Here's the
your
craziest.
dreams. Where's Freud when we need him? Okay.
I was spacewalking. And I
Interesting.
felt really like I was spacewalking. And if you could see a less likely astronaut than me, I don't know who it would be. But I was actually spacewalking. So there were crazy dreams, and the doctors told me that they've heard a lot of reports from people that, you know, really crazy, vivid dreams when things. That's gone away too. Now I just worry about my kids who are at college, and I wake up with those dreams. But those are normal.
Those are nightmares. Those aren't dreams.
That's a nightmare in itself. I know. So when you have your kids in college, you hear some of these colleges implementing these vaccine mandates. How do you feel about that? How do your kids feel about that?
Well, our older kids, all of our kids, 3 of our 4 kids are over 21, and so they all got to make their own decisions. They all decided to be vaccinated. That was their choice. We told them we were getting vaccinated, but again, I think that people need to be comfortable with it. You know, I've talked to some friends of my 25-year-old daughter who lives in Chicago, and some of her friends are very concerned that it might affect their fertility. Now, I haven't seen any evidence of that, but if they're concerned about it, they need to sit down with their doctor and go through it and have it explained to them. We can't just say to people, do it because we said so.
So you're against this whole vaccine mandate?
I'm against the mandates from the government because I think that what we should be doing is educating people, helping them to understand why I think it's much more beneficial to get the vaccine than it is not, and that the risks of long COVID, as you were talking about, the risks of it being so random. I mean, I had a 61-year-old cousin and her husband, both in great health, got COVID, they both died. And left a daughter. You know, so it's random and you don't know what's going to happen. Lots of people who are watching went through that. So let's not go through that if we can avoid it. So I'm not for the mandates, but I'm for educating people about like what it is so they can make their own decisions smartly.
Speaking of education, you got 2 kids in school. A lot of people talking about critical race theory. How do you feel about it? And some people are saying, well, you're not allowed to discuss it anymore because you could get canceled. You only have to like toe the party line, or that's that.
Well, you know me, I'm not worried about getting canceled. They've tried to cancel me a bunch of times, and I just keep coming back. I think this, we should not be teaching our children that they should judge the person who's sitting next to them by their race or their ethnicity, because that's absolutely the opposite of what Dr. King taught us, you know, 60 years ago, which was that you judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. And do we need to teach about the things that happened in this country that were awful, the Ku Klux Klan, and all the civil rights violations that happened over the years, slavery? Absolutely, we have to teach about that. But we don't have to say that the person sitting next to you today is somehow responsible for that, because they aren't. That's ancient history in this country. And anybody who thinks that our country is not better off today from a racial and ethnic perspective than we were 20 years ago, 50 years ago, is, to me, just not paying attention.
I know, but it does seem like we're not united. And I know Joe Biden talked about uniting the country, but I really haven't heard any of that. It seems like it's worse than ever.
No, well, he has not governed, in my opinion, like he campaigned. As you said, he campaigned to say, I'm going to bring the country together and be a moderate force. He's run far left to the very woke people in his own party on the far left wing of his party. That's not going to bring the country together. We need to respect each other and respect each other's opinions. And we have to stop telling kids in school that they shouldn't be proud to be Americans, that they should somehow feel guilty about who they are and where they were born and what their circumstances are. Kids don't control who their parents are. Kids don't control the history of this country. Let's tell them they need to be a positive force for making the country even better. Our country is better and fairer to everybody than any country in the world. And we should be teaching kids that.
I do have to ask on behalf of Mets fans, because you joined
Yes.
the board of directors this past year, what's going on with the GM position? Because last week it was Adam Cromie and everyone's like, who's this guy? And now it's Billy Epler, possibly coming from the West Coast, from the Angels. You got any insight on this?
I do, but none that I can share with you at the moment. But what I will tell you is I believe that the Mets will have an announcement very soon about the person running our baseball area.
You like him?
Well, the person that we pick, I like, yes.
Okay.
And I'll say this. There's been a lot of reporting about all this stuff, but what I can tell you is that Steve Cohen has been working incredibly hard, personally, incredibly hard to find the right person. And let's face it, he made a huge investment in buying the New York Mets, and he only did it for one reason, because he's a lifelong Mets fan who wants the team to win again. And I absolutely believe that Steve will help us do that. And it's going to be a lot of opportunity, and I think next year will be the beginning of a really good run for the Mets.
Without Thor, though.
Well, look,
He's going to the Angels.
He's going
so
to the
maybe
Angels.
There's the connection
well,
there.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. He never gave the Mets, as I understand it, a chance to match the offer that he got from the Angels. So you can't keep somebody if they don't come back and want. I think Noah wanted to leave. I think he wanted to go to California. He became a free agent. That's his choice. I wish him the best of luck because he pitched great for us for many years. I hope he's healthy. I hope he pitches well. No hard feelings, and we'll get some great pitchers in here to pitch for us.
Trade.
No.
Come on.
No trade.
Okay, he's not going to tell me. All right. All right.
No trade.
The book is out now. Chris Christie, Republican Rescue, former governor of New Jersey. Always nice to talk to you, Chris.
Great to be here with
Thank
both of you. Thank you.
you. All right.